Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads to continue with Wicked. Chapter 4 of the Boq part. In years to come, and Boq would live a long life, he would remember the rest of the summer as scented with the must of old books. When ancient scripts swam before his eyes, he slept alone in the musty stacks. He hovered over the mahogany drawers lined with vellum manuscripts. All season long, it seemed, the lozenge-paned windows between bluestone mullions and transom misted over again and again with flecks of small but steady rain, almost as brilliant and as pesky as sand. Apparently, the rain never made it as far as Munchkin Land. But Boq tried not to think about that. Crope and Tibet were coerced into researching for Dr. Gillikin. At first, they had to be dissuaded from going about their forays in costumes of disguise. Fake pince nez, powdered wigs, cloaks with high collars, all to be found in the well-stocked locker of the three Queen's Student Theatrical and Terpsichorean Society. When convinced of the seriousness of the mission, they fell to with gusto. Once a week, they met Boq and Elphaba in the railway square. Elphaba showed up during these misty weeks, entirely swathed in a brown cloak, hood, and veil that hid all but her eyes. She wore long, frayed, grayed gloves that she boasted buying second-hand from a local undertaker. Cheap for having been used in funeral services. She sheathed her bamboo pole legs in a double thickness of cotton stocking. The very first time Boq saw Elphaba like this, he said, "I just barely managed to convince Crope and Tibet to lose those espionage drag. And you come in looking like the original Cumberk witch." "I don't dress for the approval of boys," she said, shucking her cloak and folding it inside so the wet wool never touched her. On the occasion when another cafe patron would come through, shaking water off an umbrella, Elphaba always recoiled, flinching as if she were caught by even a scattering of drops. "Is that religious conviction, Elfie, that you keep yourself so dry?" said Boq. "I've told you before, I don't comprehend religion, although conviction is a concept I'm beginning to get. In any case, someone with a real religious conviction is, I propose, a religious convict and deserves locking up. Hence, observed Crope, your aversion to all water. Without you knowing it, it might be baptismal splash, and then your liberty as a free-range agnostic would be curtailed. I thought you were too self-absorbed to notice my spiritual pathology," said Elphaba. "Now, what we've got today." Every time, Boq thought, would that Galinda were here, for the usual camaraderie that grew up among them during these weeks was refreshing. A model of ease and even wit. Against conviction, they had dropped the honorifics. They interrupted one another and laughed and felt bold and important because of the secrecy of their mission. Crope and Tibet cared little about animals or the bands. They were both Emerald City boys, sons, respectively, of a tax collector and of a palace security advisor. But Elphaba's passionate belief in the work enlivened them. Boq himself grew involved too. He imagined Galinda drawing up her chair up with them, losing her upper crust reserve, allowing her eyes to glow with a shared and secret purpose. "I thought I knew all about the shapes of passion," Elphaba said one bright afternoon. "I mean, growing up with a Unionist minister for a father, you come to expect that theology is the fundament on which all other thought and belief is based. But boys, this week, Dr. Gillikin made some sort of scientific breakthrough. I'm not sure what it was, but it was involving manipulating lenses, a pair of them, so he could peer at bits of tissue that he had laid on the transparent glass and backlit by candlelight. He began to dictate, and he was excited that he's saying his findings. He composed his arias out of what he was seeing. Recitatives about structure, about color, about the basic shapes of organic life. He had a horrible sandpapery voice, and you might imagine for a goat. But how he warbled. Tremolo in the annotations, vibrato on the interpretations, and sostenuto on the implications. Long, triumphant, open vowels of discovery. I was sure someone could hear. I sang with him. I read his notes back to him like a student of musical composition. The good doctor was emboldened by his findings, and he required that their digging become more and more focused. He did not want to announce any breakthroughs until he figured out the most politically advantageous way to present them. Toward the end of the summer, the push was to find the Lurlinist and early Unionist disposition on how the animals been created and differentiated. It's not a matter of uncovering a scientific theory by a pre-scientific company of unionist monks or pagan priests and priestesses, explained Elphaba, but Dr. Dillman wants to authenticate the way our ancestors thought about this. The wizard's right to impose unjust laws may be better challenged if we know how the old codger explains it to themselves. It was an interesting exercise. In one form or another, we all know some of these origin myths that predate the Oziad, said Tibbet, throwing his blonde bangs back with a theatrical force. The most coherent one has our dear putative fairy Queen Lorraine on a voyage. She was tired of traveling in the air. She stopped and called from the deserts a font of water hidden deep beneath the earth's dry dunes. The water obeyed in such abundance that the land, the vase, and all of its febrile variety sprang up almost instantly. Lorraine drained herself into a stupor and went in for a long rest on the top of Mount Runctisible. When she awoke, she relieved herself copiously, and this is because the Gillikin River, running around the vast tracts of the great Gillikin forest and skirting through the eastern regions of the Vincus and coming to a stop at Restwater. The animals were terricolous and thus of a lower order that Lorraine and her retinue. Don't look at me like that. I know what the word means. I looked it up. It means living on or near ground. The animals had come into their being as rolled clouds of earth dislodged from the exuberant plant growth. When Lorraine let loose, the animals thought the raging stream was a flood sent down to drown their fresh new world and the despair of their existence. In a panic, they flung themselves into the torrent and attempted to swim through Lorraine's urine. Those who became intimidated and turned back remained animals, beasts of burden, slaughtered for flesh, hunted for fun, counted for profit, admirers and innocent. Those who swam on made it to the farther shore were given gifts of conscientiousness and language. What a gift, being able to imagine your own death, muttered Croak. Thus animals, convention, as long ago as history can remember, divides the animals and animals. Baptism by piss, said Elphaba. Is that a subtle way to explain the talents of animals and to degenerate them at the same time? And what of the animals who drowned? Asked Boq. It must have been the real losers, or the martyrs, or the ghosts who lived underground now and stopped all the water supply so the field of Munchkin Land dry up today. They all laughed and had more tea and brought to the table. I found some later scriptures with more of a unionist slant, Boq said. They tell a story that I guess would be derived from a pagan narrative, but it's been cleaned up some. The flood occurring sometime after creation and before the advent of humankind wasn't a massive piss by Lorraine, but the sea of tears wiped up by the unnamed god on the god's only visit to Oz. The untamed god perceived the sorrow that would overwhelm the land throughout time and bawled in pain. The whole of Oz was a mile deep in saltwater tides. The animals kept afloat by means of the odd log, the uprooted tree. Those who swallowed enough of the tears of the unnamed god were imbued with a fulsome sympathy for their kin, and began to construct rafts from the flotsam. They saved their kind out of mercy, and from their kindness they became a new sentient lot, the animals. Another kind of baptism from within, said Tibet. Indigestion. I like it. But what of the pleasure of faith, said Croat. Can a witch or a sorcerer take an animal and through a spell create an animal? Well, that's the thing I've been looking into, said Elphaba. The pleasure of faithers, say that if anything, Lorraine or the unnamed god could have done it once, magic could do again. They even hint the original distinction between animals and animals was a Cumbric witch spell. So strong and enduring, it never wore off. This is dangerous propaganda. Malice incarnate. No one knows if there is such a thing as a Cumbric witch, let alone if there ever was. Myself, I think it's part of the Lurlina cycle that's got detached and developed independently. Errant nonsense. We have no proof that magic is so strong. We have no proof that God is so strong, interrupted Tibet, which strikes me as being good as an argument against God as it is against magic, said Elphaba. But never mind that. The point is, if it's an enduring Cumbric spell, centuries old, it may be reversible, or it may be perceived to be reversible, which is just as bad. In the interim, while sorcerers work experimenting with charms and spells, the animals lose their rights one by one. Just slowly enough so that it's hard to see it as a coherent political campaign. It's a dicey scenario, and one of the Dr. Delamain hasn't figured out. At this point, Elphaba hitched the burnous part of her cloak up over her head and disappeared in the shadow of its folds. What? Said Boq, as he put a finger to his lips. Croak and Tibet, as if on cue, launched into some silly banter about their professional goals of being abducted by pirates of the desert and made the dance to Fandango dressed only in slave shackles. Boq saw nothing amiss. A couple of clerks reading the racing form, some genteel ladies with their lemonades and novellas, a TikTok creature buying coffee beans by the pound, a parody of an old professor figuring out some theorem by arranging and rearranging some sugar cubes along the edges of a butter knife. A few minutes later, Elphaba relaxed. That TikTok thing works at Crage Hall. I think it's called a grammatic. Usually it shadows Madame Morrible like a lovesick puppy, but I don't think it's me. But I don't think it saw me. But she was too jittery to continue the conversation, and after she made sure their next assignments were clear, the crew disbanded into the misty streets. That's the end of that chapter. See you later.